Hey guys, welcome back to the first episode.
Welcome back.
Episode 1. It's good to see you guys here.
This will definitely be better than episode 1 of Star Wars, right?
Oh man. Are you a Star Wars fan at all?
Dude, I am a Star Wars fan.
I'm not.
Really?
I'm gonna get berated for this of anybody
wow.
who's gonna listen and watch it. I'm not. I mean, I'll watch it. I don't hate it. I watch it. I'm like, it's an.
Are you a Trekkie?
No, but I like the newer ones a lot better, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Chris Pine is just good.
Fantastic. But no, I'm not really. No, I'm not. Matrix. I'm a Matrix.
I like the Matrix.
Yeah. If I'm gonna pick out of that sci-fi realm, Matrix would be where I go.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, man. So anyway, I'm Richard Overman.
And I'm Hunter Pettyjohn.
And we're here to talk about men, right? So, really from a biblical standpoint of like, what does that look like in society? We talked about, there's a lot of things that get put on men, right?
Yeah.
Like from a boy to a teenager to, 20s, college age, to a family, to like work. Man, so many different like stereotypes and just things get put on us. Sometimes we put them on ourselves, right?
Yes.
A lot of times, but society's kind of already written that script for us sometimes, and we feel like we just gotta follow along, right? We don't want to go against the grain too much, or we'll get made fun of, right? We'll have guilt and shame. We feel like we gotta just carry the world sometimes, right?
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of times, because of that, there's a lot of falling into just different types of sin, or different types of even just pigeonholing who you are as a person, as a man. If you really have a passion for something in particular, but yet those expectations, those things that are said about us, the things that are said just in general within society about what a man is. Yeah. It can really pigeonhole you and keep you from your own destiny, really. And I think Paul did a really good job based on this is the verse that we've kind of like based this podcast around, and that is 1 Timothy 6:11. He's talking to Timothy, writing to him, saying, a lot of the world are doing all these different things that are just sinful. They're against God, But like he says, but you, man of God, flee from all this and pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, endurance, and gentleness. And those are, it really stood out to me personally, just reading him say, calling Timothy a man of God. And then he follows it up with, well, this is what makes you a man of God, right? And a lot of those things are not what society, even then, I think, was like, this is what a man is, right? Love, endurance, gentleness. I mean, what man sits there and goes, oh, to be a man, I got to be gentle. We're told to be strong.
Being tough. Be tough. Rub dirt on it. Don't cry.
Definitely.
Yeah. No, I think it's so true, man. I think of when he puts in there, he's like, flee from it, right? I think of like what we think of today. The word I think of, and I don't think it's a bad word in its own, but we always just say it's a process, right? Well, I think we're giving ourselves kind of permission to like slowly ease out of our sin, slowly stop, drinking, slowly stop watching pornography, slowly stop doing the things I'm doing. And he's like, no, like run, turn, and just sprint away from it, because if not, it'll keep ensnaring you and pulling you back in. And I think we know all that all too well, right? Like from our lives. So the name of the podcast is Mend, right? Like that came about 1.5 years ago. God really put men on my heart. I'll tell you, most of my life, like I think it's a lot of my childhood growing up, but like I've had kids were always just kind of like where my heart was drawn to, right? Just like wanting to minister to them, wanting to just like love them and just make sure they always had somebody, right? Because you don't always know what their home life's like, their school life, their friends. So just giving a space that they just feel safe, they feel loved. And that will always be, man. Like we've talked about it, right? And like kids, like I want to have a family. I want to have kids. We're volunteering with a great organization, Fort Worth, that's to help foster kids, right? We've talked about adopting. That'll always be a heart. But men really got put on my heart a 1.5 years ago, and it was just watching guys and how they kind of interacted with each other, right? At the gym, out together, at church, whatever that may be. Yeah. And when it first happened, I'm like, God, who really? Like, guys, you want me to like start ministering towards guys and telling them how to be, or not, showing them how to be godly, how you've already told us? And he's like, I was like, my past, God, right? Like, you're well aware of some of the terrible decisions that I've made in my life, some of the carnage that I've left in my past. And it's kind of like, really? And then obviously he starts showing in the Bible, and it's like, there's a lot of people who have some issues. Yeah. Man. Like again, I'm not calling you because you're qualified or you're some amazing guy that you've made all these great decisions and people are going to look up to you. It's not about you. It's about him, right? Like, so I've really realizing that over the last year and a half, it's really started ministering to me and going like, it's not about me, right? Like, it's not about what I have done, what I haven't done, the bad decisions, good choices. Like, it's really about none of that. It's about really even what Paul said in there about, just being a man of God, not a man of Richard, not a man of Hunter, right? A man of God, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and all throughout the Bible, it's just peppered with people who just fall so short, and yet they were called to do God's will. Yeah. And that gives me a huge amount of just a kind of a boost, of like, God can use me too, and that's why I love that we've decided to start doing this. And like yourself, I definitely have a pretty shady past. I've done quite a few unspeakable things, I guess. A lot of things that I would try to keep in the dark. Yeah. But in this, especially ministering to men, we're going to be as open and honest and transparent as possible. Have to be, yes. And so that's why today we're going to go ahead and just jump right into sharing our testimony, giving you guys our stories, just being really open and honest about everything. And so I'll go ahead and start if you're all right with that. Yeah. Awesome. So I grew up in church. The joke is that I was going to church 9 months before I was born, right? My parents were constantly committed to church, very much there every time the doors were open, there even after I was born and after my brother and sister were born, every time the doors were open, we were there Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, any sort of, deal on Saturdays or whichever other day that the doors were open, we were just there, and I was so thrilled and thankful that my parents raised me like that, because it just really instilled this need for being in community with God's church, with fellow believers, brothers and sisters in Christ. And a lot of people hear that and they go, so you had a really good childhood. And I would say, yes, I did have a really good childhood, but there were also things that just kind of I went through that a lot of other people just really didn't go through. And a lot of that comes from being in church constantly, and also being the oldest. There was kind of this pressure, whether I put it on myself or my parents did or my siblings did or just the church in general did, but there's this pressure to just be the best that I could be and live up to this expectation that like I'm going to lead the way and my siblings will follow, right?
Do you know what age, do you know about what age you really started feeling that, or like just mentally thinking back, like, man, around this age is really where I started taking on that responsibility?
Yeah, so I would say probably around like 4 or 5 years old, about the time that I was getting into school. I was the first one off to school, and so like I'm the big brother. I'm doing new and great things, right? And it also came from the fact that like my parents would have these big yelling matches between each other, and they would get into these fights and these arguments, And I kind of played peacemaker, right? Whether it be that I got in between mom and dad sometimes, which was just not the place that I needed to be. But most of the time it was more along the lines of make sure that my brother's okay, make sure my sister's okay, that like they're distracted. We had some gaming systems sometimes, or we would go and play with dolls and stuffed animals or whatever, and it just I was there to just kind of be the example and just be okay, but there wasn't really anybody there for me to do that, to keep me okay with those things, but also growing up, just the expectation of make sure that my brother and sister, get on and off of the bus at the right places, and, different things like that. And so that just kind of drove me forward. And unfortunately, because I never dealt with that at all in really a healthy manner, I just continued to feel like there's expectations that I needed to be the best that I could be. And it turned into expectations to be the best for my siblings, and it turned into I gotta look good, right?
Wow.
And so I going into church and going into school and going into baseball and all these different areas, I just needed to look good, and that then became one of my top priorities, was to look good, and do good and all this. And so I started wearing masks. I started acting certain ways so that other people around me would see the hunter that they wanted to see, at least what I thought they wanted to see.
A chameleon, kind of just change colors, change those masks in every different area you go into.
Definitely. Yeah. In baseball, I was talking and acting the way that my teammates wanted me to. That was cool.
Yeah.
At school, it was something completely different. At home, it was something completely different. And the weird thing about home is I acted one way around my parents, and then I acted another way around my siblings, even. And then of course at church, right? And church was one of those places, because I was going there from the very start. I desperately wanted to be liked and to be somebody who was popular there at church, because I had spent so much time there and I had so much head knowledge. I knew so much. And so I just needed to know all the right answers. And I wanted to I was eager to be the first one to give those answers, and that actually drove into youth group, right there at church. As soon as I got into youth group, I quickly became a leader. And the reason for that is because I had so much head knowledge. And I manipulated that head knowledge into this, I got it all together. And so anybody who is a new believer, just come to me and I'll teach you how to, and it was not a, I care about you, I love you, I want to help you through this. I want to help you get to a place of understanding within being a Christian, within our beliefs. It was, I need to look good. And man, I was middle school. That was around middle school or so. And I was wearing so many different masks. I would look at myself in the mirror and literally go, I don't know who the heck I am.
Wow. Yeah, I was going to ask that question. Was this an intentional, you knew you were changing that behavior in different spaces, or was it just fluid? At some point it just started happening and you were just doing it, so it sounds like you kind of knew.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was not I know where I'm going with this, right. But I knew that this is what I was doing on purpose, because I want to look good, and that's the only thing that mattered. And so and a lot of it started with habitual lying. My life was pretty boring, honestly, in my own eyes. I thought it was pretty boring. And so I would start making up these extravagant things about my life to gain attention from other people. And once you start lying, you just have to keep on lying to keep up with the original lie.
Previous lies.
Right, right.
Yeah, no, I can relate to that.
And so around this time, though, I started down a really deadly path, something that has stayed with me, something that I have struggled with for 25 plus years now, and that is addiction, and specifically sex addiction. And I was in this mindset of, I would feel depressed or anxious or all these different things about me, me, right? And all of a sudden I needed a way to cope, an outlet. And growing up in church, I knew what was right and wrong, right? I told you I had all that head knowledge, right? But I didn't have a healthy way to cope with all these different things going on in my life, and this desire to be unique, this desire to be popular and liked, and to be a leader for my own sake. And so I had this mindset of a line in the sand type of mindset, and I would sit there and I draw a line in the sand and I go, okay, I can go up to this point, but I'm not going to cross it.
Yeah.
And it started off with, grabbing mom's Victoria's Secret magazines or fashion magazines, and then after a while, after a couple months, that wasn't enough. And so it's easy to walk over a line in the sand as opposed to what I wish I would have done from the very beginning, even before the magazines, was put up a wall.
Yeah.
Because then you got to climb over that wall, and it's not very easy to do that, and you have many different chances to turn back away from that at that point. But with a line in the sand, you're just stepping over and you just create this new line, and you go, okay, I'll do this, but I won't cross this line. And then eventually it was just one thing after another. The magazines weren't enough. So then I was getting on dial-up internet. Some of y'all know what that is. Yeah. Not many.
Noise is going through everyone's head. When you say dial up, right, the noise.
Yeah.
We're not going to do it. But
Did you ever get on the phone whenever somebody was on dial up and you just put it straight up to your ear, and it just, man, busted eardrums.
Yeah. It wasn't good.
No.
It wasn't good.
So I was getting on dial up internet and looking up bikini models, or and it eventually got to topless pictures and nude pictures, and then videos, porn videos, and I would say that I was looking at porn the whole time, because of where my mind was and what I was doing with it.
So what age did this start, and then what period of time did it go from the Victoria's Secret magazines to now watching basically full-fledged pornography, right?
Yeah.
What did that look like?
So it started around 11 or so, right there around puberty. I actually started puberty well before anybody else my age did.
Yeah.
I've always apparently been an early bloomer.
You just wanted you wanted to be a leader so bad.
I really did. Yeah. That my anatomy just started to catch up with me, I guess. But yeah, around 11. I was looking at those magazines, and because of the fact that I was in church, I feel like this kind of slowed me down, at least a little bit, of the progression and in the way that it went, because it wasn't until close to the end of middle school, early high school, before I was watching pornography, videos and masturbating. And so, there was just that work up to that point. And unfortunately, there were many times where I lied to my parents and stayed homesick from school so that I could watch hours of porn, or I could, scroll through tons of pictures online, or, back in the day, AOL AIM, right? The instant messenger.
Yeah.
I was using that and talking to all sorts of chat rooms, talking to all sorts of girls and all of that. And you know, as time went along, I was doing different things. Once social media started to come into play, I was using that to try to hook up with different girls, and it was just a terrible, deadly path that I was down. And unfortunately, I needed more, and I needed more, and I needed more. And what was controlling my life and driving my life was this addiction. And one thing that I am really excited to talk about in our podcast to come is shame.
Yeah.
Because shame was the fuel behind my addiction. I would act out and immediately feel shame.
Yeah.
And then that shame would then transfer into depression, anxiety, boredom, sometimes even happiness. I felt this urge to go into acting out.
Yeah.
And then as soon as the pinnacle of acting out happened, bam, shame.
Yeah.
And so at this point, I was in high school, especially. It was just really deep into addiction, and there was so much secrecy, so much shame. It just ruled my life. I came close to losing jobs. My first year of college, I flunked every single class that I was in because I would wake up, watch porn, and go, okay, well, I'll go to the next class. And then I'd continue to watch porn. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll go to the next class. And then I would get online and chat with different people. And I'd be like, oh, I'll go to the next class. And I just didn't show up to class anymore.
Yeah.
And I failed all of my classes.
Wow.
And so that just continued to move me forward. I felt like as I got out on my own, I felt like I was kind of controlling it. But I was still wearing all these masks.
Yeah.
Nobody knew who Hunter was, right? And so fast forward to like 2012 or so, and I had been in a relationship for about 4 years. I was engaged. I was living with this woman. I felt like I loved her. I was faithful, right? But even just looking at porn, even masturbating, even doing those different things, I was unfaithful. And so around that time, my parents, as we're like getting ready for a wedding and everything, all that goes into that, you know about that, right? Just getting ready for all that. My parents help my then fiance, which thank you, Mom and Dad. Yeah, definitely. Helped her get into a secret email that I had, which I used to have an affair, to talk with these different women who I cheated on my fiance with. Mm-hmm. And the whole truth came out. And that was one of the first times that truth came out about me. And I wasn't able to lie my way out of it. Because I had gotten so good at lying and covering up things and making things okay. Yeah. And so around that time, or at that time, she gave me the ring back. I got kicked out of my apartment, and my parents graciously said, okay, you're our son. You can live here, but under one condition, and that is that you get help. Mm-hmm. And I was like, get help? What do you mean?
Just no idea.
Right.
Like after even that, like them finding it, truth coming out, still it wasn't in your head of like, this is a problem.
Yeah, no, I thought that I had gotten caught and whoopsie daisy, right? Hopefully next time I won't get caught, or hopefully, fingers crossed, I can hold out and not cheat. Because I didn't want to. Yeah. It wasn't something that I was just like, oh man, I want to get into a relationship and then cheat. Yeah. So I was like, help for what? And they said, Hunter, you're a sex addict. And I was like, And that's not real.
Yeah.
You know, that's for celebrities to like make up and say, you know, I can get away with the cheating and all this other stuff by saying, well, I'm addicted to sex.
Yeah. Like I wanted to do it, you know, I was in a situation, so I'll just go for a little bit and then I'll go back to my normal way.
Right. Yeah. And so I actually got drug kicking and screaming, basically, right, into an outpatient program through the Meyer Clinic in Richardson. And I just want to say this, guys, if you or anyone else that you know struggles with addiction to pornography, to sex, you know, if you're looking at hours of porn, if you're masturbating multiple times a day, if you're paying for sex, if you're having one night stand after one night stand, you can't seem to hold down a relationship. If relationship has broken up and broken apart because of infidelity, get help. Yeah. It's the best thing. One of the best things that ever happened to me was going into this program. It was called Pathway to Freedom, up in Richardson, Texas, through the Meyer Clinic. This guy, John Nord, he's a recovering addict himself. I think around that time, he had about 15 years of sobriety. Wow. Had been in recovery, I think, for about 20 years. And so, and that was almost 10 years ago. And I think the last time that I looked at it, it's just called Freedom now. Okay. But he's still doing it, as far as I know. And I would suggest anybody, just give him a call. If you're around the DFW area and you're struggling, you know somebody that's struggling, give them a call. The Meyer Clinic. It was an 8-week intensive outpatient program. We went twice a week. It was me and this other guy. It was group therapy. And it dealt with the spiritual, mental, psychological, physical aspects of what sex addiction is and how to recover and how to move forward past that. And it was the hardest thing, one of the absolute hardest things I've ever done, but it was one of the best things that I've ever done. There was about 16 hours or so of like classroom time, I guess, where we met and talked about things and learned. And then there was about 10 hours a week of homework time, right? And I was living in Midlothian, driving up there to Richardson to do that. I was working out in Arlington full time. I was also trying to go to church. I was trying to attend meetings, anonymous meetings, like Sex Addiction, Sex Addicts Anonymous. Also Celebrate Recovery, which is an amazing program. Yeah, and
nothing but amazing things about.
Oh yeah, it's an incredible program. But I did all of that. And again, it was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I am so glad that I went through that. Yeah. Because it opened my eyes, and I can no longer plead ignorance. Yeah. Because I know that I'm a sex addict, a recovering sex addict currently, and I attribute a lot of this to this program. But I just celebrated 5 years of sobriety.
Yes, dude.
Thank you.
That's so amazing, man.
Thank you.
I love it. I have a question. So you went kicking and screaming, right? The program's 8 weeks. At what point during this program did it really kind of click? Did you really, that truth start coming into the light and you really realize like, wow, I really have a problem and I really need to focus on this, and this, I can tell this is going to really maybe help me or be a big deal? What point in that program did that really kind of click for you?
You know, it probably was, well, I know that a big portion of it, the step one, realized that I am not in control, right? That I am consumed by my addiction and that I can't, my life has become unmanageable. It was probably the consultation before the program even started, talking to John. He, like I said, he's a recovering addict himself. And so he was able to just like scrape past my BS, right? And he was able to like present it on a silver platter and be like, see all this stuff that you're telling me and that you're telling your family and that you're even telling yourself, it's all a bunch of BS. Yeah. and you do have a problem. Now it's time for you to admit it. And I walked away from that going, oh, wow, okay, I do have a problem.
Yeah.
And it still didn't make me go, oh yes, I'm ready to jump right into this and get better. I still thought to myself, well, I can do this with God, right? Like, I'm a Christian. I accepted Christ as my Lord and Savior at 7 years old.
Yeah.
And I've been a Christian this whole time. And I believe that God can help me through this. I don't need someone else to oh man, I was so far from the truth. And so went through that, and it finally, probably the first couple of sessions, that wall started breaking down of like, okay, I do need this. And at that point I was able to accept it all and put my whole self into this. And again, I stumbled and fell a lot during those first few months, especially, even the first couple of years, because I mean, this was back in 2012. It's 2020 now. So I've been in recovery for 8 years, right? And noticed that sobriety wise, it's been 5 years. Yeah. So there were a lot of stumbles and falls. I had relapses. I had slips, so to speak. And so I got done with the program, and shortly after that, got into a relationship with a coworker, which my advice to everyone out there is that's not really a good idea. Unless,
it can work, but probably not ideal.
Yeah, unless you're maybe a minister at a church, maybe. I don't know. That still even seems a little. But, God works in mysterious ways, right?
He does.
So I started dating this woman, and we were having a great time. We bonded over the fact that we both had broken engagements. We had a lot of things in common. We enjoyed our time together. We had fun, right? But only a couple of months into this relationship, we found out that she was pregnant. Wow. And I'll tell you what, man. At first, it was a really scary thing. Yeah. It was very worrisome. I was starting to freak out, and it was just like, I'm in my early 20s. She's not even 21 yet, and
just fear set in.
Oh yeah. Yeah. What am I gonna do? How many jobs do I need to work? Where are we gonna live? What are we gonna, all this. And I would say less than a day later, God just really brought this peace. I didn't even ask for it, but God brought it. He brought this peace and this wisdom that was not of me whatsoever. And it was, hey, whether you're freaked out about it and worried about it, or you're happy and thrilled and like gracious, you're still gonna have a baby. And so I was like, oh, we might as well be happy then, right? Because I grew up knowing that I was gonna be a husband and a dad. Like those are the two things that I knew for sure, right? What I was gonna do with the rest of my life, I had no idea. Still have no idea. But those two things I knew as truth. And so I was like, you know what? I've always wanted a kid, so let's be happy. And at that point, we decided to be happy, right? We decided to turn around and be like, this is great. And so just a few days probably before we were going to go and get an ultrasound and eventually tell our family about the good news, that we had. She came up to me at work and with just tears running down her face, and I just knew immediately. And she had a miscarriage. And I sent her to the hospital, stayed at work. And still to this day, man, that is just the worst thing that's ever happened in my entire life. Yeah. And we found out, her going to the hospital, found out that she was actually going to have twins. Wow. And for some reason, it doesn't make sense in my mind, but in my heart, it just hurt even more.
Yeah.
It just made things even worse. And my parents just loved on us and said, hey, we open up our home. You guys can live here as long as you need. And we're going to love on you. We're going to take care of you. You guys just deal with this, you know. And I was already going to Celebrate Recovery and anonymous groups and going to church and all this. And I really was using that as an outlet to grieve. And even though at first we grew close together, going through the same experience, as I was saying things like, you know, why don't you come with me to Celebrate Recovery? Why don't you talk about this? It was not the outlet of grief that she wanted to participate in. And so she then began to think that I was shaming her for the way that she wanted to. And resentment built up, and she broke things off with me eventually. Yeah. And it was a very venomous breakup. Wow. Things were said, things were done that there's no reconciliation that has happened from that. I have forgiven, and I have asked for forgiveness, but there's not really, it's one of those deals where you just can't go back from that. Yeah. And the forgiveness came a lot later. But when this first happened, I was devastated because I had grown attached to her through an experience that was the most painful thing that ever happened in my entire life. And to the point of, like, still to this day, Father's Day is a really tough and rough day for me. Yeah. Except for this last year, I've pretty much stayed in bed on Father's Day and not done a single thing. And when the breakup happened, I relapsed, and I relapsed hard. Like, I jumped headfirst into relapse, and I knew better, and I knew what I was doing. And I was going out, getting blackout drunk every night, you know, after work, and you know, taking women home, going home with women, having one night stand after one night stand. I jumped headfirst into porn. Again, I was spending 10, 12 hours looking at porn. I was masturbating, you know, 5 or 6 times a day on average. I was just so deep into it. And one thing that I still remembered how to do from being deep in my addiction was lying and wearing masks. Oh, yeah. And I started putting on masks. And I was still going to Celebrate Recovery, going, everything's great. I was still going to church. I was still meeting with my sponsor and going, man, I'm doing awesome.
No one knew.
And no one knew. And during that time, I did the most regrettable and just worst thing that I've ever done in my entire life while deep into this relapse. And I'm not going to go into too much detail at all. Yeah. But it landed me in some legal trouble. And I was arrested, spent some time in jail, and eventually took a plea to be on probation, which I am still currently on that probation. And just by the way, guys, our full testimony, we're going to be writing out our full testimony, and anybody who wants to read it, it'll be even more transparent than this. Yeah. Right? Anybody who wants to read it, just comment, send
email
a message.
us. Yeah, send us an email. But it's important to be transparent, right? Like it's important to give your story power, right? Yeah. Like that we no longer have to live, and that doesn't define who we are, right? What happened to us, it's real. We live through it. We take care of the things we need to take care of, but it doesn't have power on us, right? So
right. And so we'll make that available to anybody who wants to read it. Yeah. But you know, I hit rock bottom around this time. Rock bottom for me was waking up one morning not knowing how I landed in my sister's bedroom at my parents' house, half dressed. I had pissed myself. I looked terrible. And I looked at myself in the mirror and was just like, what are you doing? And God got a hold of me right then and there, and brought me to my knees. And I was just like, I'm done. And I confessed to my family. I confessed to my sponsor all that I had done, just falling deep into relapse, and started my journey again, as far as sobriety goes. Yeah. But I continued my journey of recovery. Yeah. That's one thing that I really learned, is that you might start your number of days over after a relapse. Yeah. But the path of recovery, you don't start all the way over. Yeah. You just pick back up where you were, and you keep on learning, and you keep on moving forward, because you can't go back and relearn the things that you learned at the very beginning. And so being on probation, I was taken away from my normal life, I guess. Yeah. Transplanted out here to Fort Worth. I was all alone. Lots of isolation and loneliness for the first 2 or 3 years, and then by the grace of God, I was able to connect with and get involved with City Life Church, and my goodness, the turnaround from there. And it was all of God. It wasn't City Life. Yeah. But City Life was a conduit of God.
How long ago was that?
It was in September of 2018. Okay. So about a year and a half ago or so. I have met and I realized that this is my family. This is my home. I met you. Yeah.
That's a whole other story.
Yes.
Of how we are now sitting here a year and a half later.
Yeah, because even though our stories might sound similar, we're very different people.
So different. On paper, it makes no sense.
It makes absolutely no sense that we would be best friends, but we are.
It's kind of like David and Jonathan, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know which one is which.
Nah, I don't think we have to figure that out right now.
Yeah. But I met my girlfriend, Jasmine, the love of my life, who I'll be marrying soon. I haven't put a ring on it yet, but we've already talked about that. Yeah, no.
You haven't even told me this. We're gonna find out in this. Okay.
No, but just met a lot of different people who have changed my life, who have helped mold me into where I am, and I thank God for City Life, because they have given me the opportunity, after even knowing all of this plus more, to be in leadership, to lead different areas, and to really thrive in that church and in my life, really. And so that's what brings me to here, and that's what brings me to really spending a lot of time with you, talking about doing this. Yeah. So that's my story,
that's
man.
That's amazing. That's so amazing to watch that. Give me, I have one question at the end of this, right? Like what, right? You've known God, grew up in church. You said from 7 is kind of when you got saved, right? What do you think is different now, right? Like what is different now than growing up, right? Than going through all that, in your relationship with God and just in general? What do you think's different now than it has been the rest of your life?
Yeah. So before, it was very much, I kind of checked the boxes, go to church, good. Tithe, good. Well, I didn't do that a lot. Read your Bible, sometimes, right? And so it was a lot of checking the box, and the salvation moment was so very real. Yeah. I bawled my eyes out. I was in first grade, just bawling my eyes out, coming to Jesus and going, "You are my Lord and Savior, and I accept that, and I admit that I'm a sinner." It was very real. But then from there, it didn't. I was already living a life of like going to church and doing the right thing, right? So it wasn't this like Saul to Paul moment, right?
Yeah.
Because I wasn't doing a lot of evil, so to speak. But so I just kind of kept down the same path.
Gotcha.
So there wasn't a lot of change there. But here within the last few years, I was the prodigal son. I was off doing whatever the heck I wanted to do.
Yeah.
But still holding on to, oh, but I'm saved. I still believe in God, but I just want to do these other things. And so I think the radical change in who Hunter is due to the fact that I was living this way. And then I realized, wait a second, I have Christ as my Lord and Savior, and I should be living like this. I should be doing a 180. And I did do a 180 and started living a life that is closer towards what God is calling me to do. Now, I mess up a lot. You can ask my girlfriend. I mess up a lot.
Yeah.
But I think that would be the biggest change really, is I was living for myself here recently and just made that commitment to turn my life completely around. Whereas before it was like, well, I was already going down that path of like doing what God wanted me to do, or basically checking those boxes. And so yeah.
Crazy, man.
Yeah.
So awesome, man.
Insane.
So awesome.
Yeah.